The fork slipped from my hand before his words fully landed. "You'll sign the house over, won't you?" Laughter rippled down the table, tight, rehearsed, like a toast to my obedience. The chandelier hummed above us, its light catching the wine glass trembling near my elbow. I set it down slow enough for everyone to see. "No," I said. The room froze. Someone whispered my name like a warning. My mother's pearls clicked as she turned away. My father's jaw twitched. Then nothing. Just the hum of the light and the sound of liquid dripping from the overturned glass onto the floor. Then his voice, "So will Sue." When I was 8, the sound of breaking glass never drew anyone but me. Randy would slam a door, a picture frame would fall, and I'd sweep up the shards before our parents came home. He'd call me the cleanup crew and laugh until I smiled, just so he wouldn't stop. That was our rhythm. His noise, my silence. At 12, he crashed my bike into a mailbox. Dad replaced his the same afternoon. Mine stayed bent and rusted at the curb for years. I told myself it didn't matter. It always did. At 16, I started fixing things. The kitchen sink that leaked for months, the cabinet door hanging by one hinge. Mom would pass by, coffee in hand, saying, "You should have been born a boy. At least you'd be useful." Randy would grin over his cereal spoon, tapping the bowl like applause. The sound used to echo in my head at night. When college came, Randy failed 2 semesters and still got a new car. I graduated early and got a toolbox. Dad said it suited me better than a desk job. At 25, I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped asking for it. The only person who ever saw me differently was Grandma. She'd sit with me in her garden, pointing out where roots broke the soil just to find light. "You're like that," she'd say. "You don't fight loud, but you grow through concrete." I didn't understand what she meant until she died and her will was read. Randy got a trust fund. I got her journals. Everyone acted like that was fair. I used the journals to learn how to rebuild what others gave up on. Old furniture, broken walls, myself. That's how I found the house, a 1920s craftsman collapsing into itself, listed cheap because no one wanted to touch it. I poured everything I had into it, every check, every weekend, every ounce of calm. And every time a wall cracked, I patched it before anyone could see. When my parents visited once, Dad laughed. "You'll burn yourself out fixing that dump." Mom nodded. "At least Rye's working on something real." I handed them coffee and mugs I'd made by hand. Neither finished. When they left, I watched from the porch as their car disappeared, the dust rising behind them. The house creaked, but it stood. I told myself that was enough. I used to think silence kept the peace, that endurance was proof of love. But sitting on the floor that winter night, hands raw from sanding the same step for hours, I realized I'd built a home from everything they said would break me. The wind pushed through the cracks around the window, carrying a faint smell of pine. I pressed my palm against the wooden rail I'd just restored, solid, warm, steady under my skin. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Inside, only my breathing filled the air. That was the night I stopped waiting for them to see me. The call came on a Wednesday, just before noon. I was sanding the window frame, sunlight spilling in thin, dusty stripes across the floor. The phone buzzed once, twice, and then his voice cut through the static, flat, practiced, final. "Randy needs that house more than you do. If you don't sign it over by Friday, we'll see you in court." The word court echoed through the speaker like a nail hitting glass. I didn't answer. Paint dust clung to my wrist, glittering under the light. My breath stayed even. He mistook that silence for fear and hung up, satisfied. A few seconds later, the phone lit again, Mom this time. Her tone was sharper, thinner. "You know what you owe us, Nova. We raised you. Don't make this ugly." Then the line clicked dead.
The room felt heavier after that. Outside, wind rattled the glass panes. I set the phone down next to my coffee mug and stared at the reflection trembling inside it. It wasn't anger that came first. It was recognition. This wasn't new. It was the same rule, dressed up in legal language. My effort belonged to them. The light shifted across the wall as the day slipped forward. I picked up my chisel and pressed it into the frame, the sound scraping against the quiet. The wood gave way splinter by splinter, steady, deliberate. When the dust settled, I stood there, watching sunlight touch every mark I'd made on that house. For years, I built with my hands because it was the only thing they couldn't rewrite. Now they wanted even that. I wiped the sawdust from my palms, reached for the chime of keys hanging by the door, and closed my fingers around the metal until it bit into my skin. The keys didn't rattle, neither did I. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started being their opponent. Julia's office smelled like paper and cold coffee, sharp, sterile, unbothered. I sat across from her, my palms flat on the folder I brought, the one holding 5 years of proof that I'd built everything on my own. She skimmed through the papers in silence, her pen tapping a slow rhythm against the table. Then she laughed, soft at first, then louder, shaking her head. "They are threatening to sue you," she said, finally, "for a property you own outright?" Her laughter filled the room, light, surgical, cutting through the fear that had been weighing on my chest since the call. I exhaled slow. That was the first time in my life someone had laughed with me, not at me. Julia leaned forward. "Well, let them strike first. Then we build the case, brick by brick. You have documentation." I nodded and opened the folder. Receipts, bank transfers, bills, photos of cracked plaster turned smooth, walls painted by hand, every image a record of labor. She flipped a page, paused. "Keep everything organized, digital and printed. Chain of evidence matters more than outrage." Her tone was calm, instructional, not pity, strategy. That night, I started the quiet work. I labeled folders on my computer: mortgage, renovations, utilities. Printed copies went into brown envelopes lined up across my dining table. I replayed the call with my father and saved it under threat recordings. Each click, each label studied me. At 2 a.m., I sat in the living room, surrounded by stacks of paper and the hum of the old radiator. Outside, rain tapped against the window. I stared at the house I'd built, the one they called a waste, and realized I was cataloging not just evidence, but a life. The radiator hissed once, the only sound in the room. A week later, Julia called. They filed. Her voice didn't flinch. Neither did mine. "Good," I said. "Now we file back." We met again 2 days later. The morning light cut through the blinds, striping the desk with lines of white and shadow. Julia handed me a pen. "You'll need to sign here. Counterclaim, fraud, misappropriation, and tax violation." The words sounded heavy but clean, like glass breaking in the right direction. I signed. "Proof of inheritance theft?" she asked. I passed her another folder. Inside, copies of statements from my grandmother's trust, records showing how the funds disappeared the same year Randy bought a new car and my parents remodeled their kitchen. Julia scanned, then looked up. "They left a trail." I nodded. "They always do." When she smiled, it wasn't friendly. It was professional satisfaction, the kind that promises results. "Let the system do the talking," she said. At home, I moved through the house, slowly touching each surface as if reminding it who it belonged to. The doorknob I'd polished, the stair rail I'd sanded smooth, the faint scent of varnish still lingering near the windowsill. In the kitchen, I turned off every light except one, the overhead bulb flickering softly. My laptop screen glowed pale blue as I reviewed the final files: statement of ownership, property deed, tax records. Each document opened and closed with a click that felt like breathing. In the quiet, my phone buzzed with messages from family.
You're making this worse. This isn't how we do things. Think of your parents' reputation." I didn't reply. I archived each one into a folder named Noise. Days blurred into weeks. I worked during daylight, built my defense at night. Julia handled filing subpoenas, the language of war dressed as civility. My part was order, document, verify, prepare. I became fluent in evidence. When the notice came that we'd enter discovery, I sat at the same kitchen table where I once ate alone after being told I was too independent. Now the table was a command center, laptop open, color-coded binders stacked beside my coffee cup. Every binder spine gleamed under the overhead light. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever built. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the dark window. Same face, different posture. Shoulders back, hands steady. No more flinching. Power, I realized, wasn't loud. It didn't beg. It was the quiet certainty that came from knowing the truth and daring someone to challenge it. One evening, Julia called again. "They're panicking," she said, "trying to settle." "Not yet," I answered. "Why not?" "Because they still think they can shame me into silence." Julia was quiet for a beat. "Then let them talk." The night before the family dinner, I walked through the house one last time. The floorboards creaked beneath my steps, familiar as breath. I stopped in front of the window I'd repaired months ago and watched the reflection of the city lights flicker across the glass. Somewhere in that reflection, I saw the woman they never thought I'd become. The chime of my keys broke the stillness. I picked them up, feeling the cool weight in my hand. They weren't just for the doors I'd locked, they were for the ones I'd finally learned to close. By the time dawn came, the documents were packed neatly into my bag. Everything was labeled, every page sealed. Outside, the sky was pale gray, the kind of morning that felt clean, unfinished, waiting. I poured one last cup of coffee. No sugar, no milk. The spoon clinked once against the ceramic, then silence. This time, the quiet wasn't emptiness. It was preparation. It was control. The dining room smelled of lemon polish and staged warmth. Every chair was full except the one left at the end of the table, the one meant for me. Crystal glasses, folded napkins, the illusion of peace. I walked in with Julia at my side and Carlos a step behind, the soft click of his briefcase locking the air into silence. My mother's eyes were already red, mascara trembling at the edges. "You came," she said, voice brittle with rehearsed sadness. "We thought maybe—" "I'm not here for a scene," I interrupted. My tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'm here for closure." My father cleared his throat, the sound like a gavel. "Then let's discuss what you owe the family." Julia's hand brushed the tablecloth, smoothing an invisible wrinkle. "Let's," she said evenly, and set a folder in front of him. The sound of paper against wood was sharper than any word. He opened it. His lips tightened as he read. Line by line, his authority thinned. "These are," he began, "financial records and proof of misappropriated funds, your daughter's inheritance, filed under your name." The room went very still. A fork clattered somewhere near the center of the table. Grace, Rye's fiancée, looked up, her face pale. "What inheritance?" No one answered. Julia turned another page. "We've also included your tax filings. The IRS might find them creative." My mother's breath hitched. Her hand reached for the wineglass, fingers trembling so hard the liquid rippled. Randy pushed back his chair. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're twisting everything."
I looked at him for the first time that evening. "You spent my trust fund, and you helped them try to take my house. That's not twisting. That's math." He laughed, a sound cracked by fear. "You can't prove—" Carlos slid another envelope across the table. "Bank transfers. Every cent." The envelope landed like a verdict. For a moment, no one moved. Then the noise came. All at once, voices overlapping, accusations clattering, the scrape of chairs against the floor. Julia stayed seated, calm, pen tapping the folder's edge.
When the noise peaked, she spoke softly. "You have 48 hours to drop the lawsuit, return the stolen amount with interest, and file amended taxes. Otherwise, we go federal." My father's face flushed deep red. "You're bluffing." Julia didn't blink. "We're filing in the morning." The chaos drained out of the room, leaving only the hum of the chandelier. I stood, the chair legs screeching softly as I pushed back. "I came to give you a chance," I said, "not forgiveness." Grace's voice broke through the stillness. "Randy," she whispered, "is this true?" He didn't answer. She stood up, took off her ring, and set it on the table. The small click it made was louder than any shout. My mother began to cry, loud, theatrical. My father stared at the documents as if they might catch fire. Julia gathered the folders, neatly stacking them with clinical precision. Carlos closed his case. I turned toward the door. "This isn't revenge," I said quietly. "It's accountability." No one followed me. Outside, the evening air was cold, clean. The house behind me glowed through the curtains, warm light around people who'd spent their lives mistaking control for love. Julia stepped beside me. "You did what needed to be done," she said. I nodded once. They wanted a court. Now they have one. We walked to the car. Each step on the gravel sounded like punctuation, measured, final. From inside, I heard my father shout my name, muffled through the walls. For the first time, I didn't turn back. 6 months later, the house was quiet again. No lawyers, no phone calls, no family names echoing down the hallway. Just the steady drip of rain on the porch roof and the smell of damp earth rising from the garden. The lawsuit had ended, the repayments had begun, and silence had replaced the noise they'd once used to control me. I spent mornings with coffee on the steps, watching light move across the floorboards I'd sanded myself. Every mark, every scratch, every nailhead gleamed like proof of something that couldn't be stolen. The mail still came, thick with envelopes, bank notices, official letters, but each one bore my name alone. One afternoon, Julia stopped by. No suit this time, just a cardigan and quiet eyes. She handed me a final envelope. "All settled," she said. "They signed everything." I didn't open it right away. We stood in the doorway, listening to the rain. When she left, I set the envelope on the kitchen counter, untouched. The knowledge was enough. Later, I walked through the garden, soil cool beneath my bare feet. The air smelled clean, like new wood and wet leaves. I thought about Grandma's words, how some roots break concrete just to find light. Maybe she'd seen this coming. Maybe she'd known I'd have to grow alone to grow at all. Through the window, the house glowed faintly against the gray sky. Not the expensive kind of glow, just warm, lived in, the kind that came from safety. I ran my hand along the stair rail, the same one I'd once leaned on while crying over splinters and exhaustion. The wood was smooth now, strong. A single beam of sun broke through the clouds and caught the old key ring hanging near the door. The metal shimmered gold against the fading light. I reached out, let it rest in my palm. For the first time, it didn't feel like weight. It felt like proof. This was what survival sounded like. No applause, no cheers, just the sound of rain softening against glass. Justice doesn't roar. It lingers. It waits in the corners of quiet houses and the soft click of a lock finally closing. My family thought they could rewrite what I built, but walls remember. Floors remember. I remember. Their silence now is louder than their threats ever were. The house stands not as revenge, but as record. Every nail, every scar, every repaired crack is testimony. You don't have to shout to reclaim what's yours. You just have to stop opening the door. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe and stay for more cold, quiet reckonings.